the unseen war you're in as you're reading this right now. There is a war taking place all around you, a war invisible to the natural eye. It's not fiction. It's real. And the enemy has targeted your family, your health, your resources, and your peace of mind. But here's the truth the enemy doesn't want you to know. Every believer already carries a weapon more destructive than any sword or gun. It's not sold in stores, and yet it sends dark powers fleeing. That weapon is worship. David's secret weapon against darkness. When King Saul was oppressed by a tormenting spirit, David picked up his harp. The music he played wasn't just for comfort, it was spiritual combat. His worship created an atmosphere where evil spirits simply could not remain. What looked like gentle music was, in reality, warfare through worship. Worship. Type number 1. High praise that shakes the atmosphere. First kind of worship that drives darkness away is high praise. This isn't quiet humming. It's bold, faith-filled worship that announces God's greatness aloud. When you proclaim, "My God is greater than any problem I face," you're not only encouraging yourself, you're making a declaration in the spiritual realm that binds the enemy's influence. High praise shifts focus. Instead of being occupied with fear or worry, your mind locks on to God's power. That shift in perspective creates what can be called glory pressure, an environment so charged with God's presence that sickness, confusion, and oppression have no choice but to break. Worship type number 2, complete surrender. The second type of worship is total surrender. This is when we stop clutching control and fully yield to God's will. Demonic powers thrive on pride, fear, and self-reliance, but when you lay everything down before God, those doorways slam shut. Surrender worship isn't weakness, it's strength. It declares, "I'm not fighting in my own power. I hand over my plans, fears, and struggles to the one whose power cannot fail." That alignment with God's authority creates an atmosphere of holiness so strong that spiritual darkness burns away like shadows in full sunlight. Worship. Type number 3. Warfare worship. The third kind is warfare worship, which directly targets the enemy's assignments. This is worship that leads the charge instead of shrinking back. In Scripture, entire armies were defeated not because of swords, but because God's people lifted worship that shattered the enemy's plans. Warfare worship disrupts and confuses dark strategies. Instead of being on the defense, you become a spiritual aggressor, declaring that you're not a victim, you're a threat to the enemy's schemes. Worship. Type number 4. Prophetic worship, praising ahead of time. The fourth type is prophetic worship. This worship celebrates victory before it shows up in reality. It thanks God for freedom while you're still in chains, for healing while you're still sick, for restoration while the situation still looks broken. Prophetic worship pulls tomorrow's victory into today's battle. It torments the enemy because it announces what is already written in heaven. The enemy's defeat is final and your victory is secure. Worship. Type number 5. Worship of God's holiness. Finally, the fifth kind is the worship of holiness. This is worship focused on God's purity, truth, and righteousness. Holiness creates an environment so spiritually clean that deception and corruption cannot survive in it. Worshiping God's holiness purifies our own hearts, draws His presence, and pushes out anything unclean. Darkness cannot coexist with absolute light, and demons cannot remain in an atmosphere saturated with God's holiness. Conclusion. Worship is more than a song. It's a weapon. The enemy wants you to believe worship is just a nice religious activity, a way to feel better. But worship is far more. It's a weapon of warfare. Every time you worship with sincerity and faith, you announce whose side you're on, release God's authority into your environment, dismantle hell's strategies against your life. The battle is real. Yes, but the victory has already been given through Christ. Worship is how you enforce it. When you worship this way, hell trembles and heaven rejoices.